Hello and welcome to the Crypto Club and Digital Assets weekly catch-up on Zoom. It is Sunday, the 1st of October, 2023, and as is always the case with these sessions, we never know quite what we're going to be talking about. Usually we discuss things like blockchain, crypto, DeFi, NFTs, ICOs, STOs, TGs, the Metaverse, anything else that's happening in this space, really. The sessions are open to novices and experts alike. Everyone's welcome to join in. Do check the link below to find out how to come along to a future session. And as you can see, we record these sessions and we make them available for people to watch afterwards. The great thing about that is that if you want to use this as an opportunity to promote a project you're working on, then it's a great way to take part in what we call the Gone in 180 seconds, or Gone in 3 minutes, if you want to call it like that, which is where you have 3 minutes to give a pitch without any aid such as slides or websites or anything like that. You just talk for 3 minutes on what it is that your project is about. So if you'd like to come along to a future session, talk about something that you're working on, that would be great, as long as you're not shilling, scamming, or whatever. These sessions are also useful for novices who want to come along and ask some really basic questions. More basic and more simple, the better, to be honest. It's all about learning and sharing. Anyway, with that, let's see who's going to come and join us today. Hey, Christopher. Hello.
Good evening, John. How are you? Gary, sorry.
It's
I,
not a
I'm
problem,
not a
Colin.
John Nuttall
Colin,
as well.
no problem. You can call me Colin if you want, I don't mind.
Oh, blockchain miner. That's what you got on your mug.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's always a good one, because if anyone actually understands the technology, they'll appreciate that you don't actually mine blockchains. You might mine on a blockchain, but you don't actually specifically do that. But yeah, it's a great mug. I've had it for a few years now. Somebody gave it me a while ago. Oh, I love it. So how's your world at the moment? How's the real estate stuff going along?
It's interesting. It's still obviously in pre-launch. So we're just getting the message and the marketing on that down pat. But interesting week actually. Remember that session we did a few weeks ago? And you had that TPX guy.
Yep,
Um,
Anthony Abel.
Anti Abel, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I met him in person.
Okay. Yeah, he does exist. He is a real person. He's Canadian, but don't hold that against him.
I thought he was Canadian. I thought he was English. Oh,
Oh, there you go.
it's Canadian. Yeah. So basically, I went to DLA Piper's event, real world assets and the
Yep.
future assets, and he popped in, and it's not until I got in the lift I said, I know your face. I've seen you somewhere before. And you had TPX on it, and he thinks, oh, I met you at Gary's event online. And then
Excellent.
yeah, we had a brief chat, and he did promise that we'll have that coffee, whether it be a virtual coffee or and stuff like that. So he really appreciated what you're doing
Yeah.
in the community and spreading knowledge and information.
Yeah. Well, that's what this is all about. And because I've been in this space for a number of years, I've got to know who are the real people and who may
Mm,
not be. So DLA Piper, yeah, done some stuff where they've hosted some events in the past that I've been involved in.
okay.
So that they've got some really good people who seriously know, particularly on the regulatory side of things and structuring of companies and that kind of thing. They're really good on that. And there's a few other law firms who I'm comfortable with recommending when people say, "Oh, does anyone know a law firm who actually understands this stuff?" Because
Mm,
I've had some dealings. In fact, recently there was one guy who was in touch with me, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've been in touch with this company, blah blah blah." So okay, do they know anything about crypto? It's like, well, I think so. It's like, okay, do they know anything about jurisdictions of crypto and regulatory requirements and financial regulatory consideration? It's like, no. It's like, okay, you might want to find someone who does. They're not cheap, but they actually know what I'm talking about. So
yeah,
that's good.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so so how did you find the event? So I couldn't make that one, but it looked really
Yeah,
interesting.
I'll put a little post up on my LinkedIn. I met some really interesting people from chain analysis, a couple of lawyers from DLA, Papa, Karen, she's a really lovely lady. Met quite a few policy individuals there were there.
Okay.
Policy guys. They were very much looking at couple of regulatory Avara dialed in, the virtual asset regulatory authority from Dubai.
Okay.
They dialed in along with the godfather of Mika, the guy who created Mika. He was there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so he dialed in,
So
and
he could tell you all about the travel rule and that. Then.
yeah, he did a long piece on that, and just talked about 27 countries who are part of it. That's going to be implemented. They were talking about MICA too. I'm not sure if that's going to go ahead.
Okay. I'm sure it will, as is always the case with all regulation. There'll always be a version 2, a version 3, and everything like that. And we've just been joined by Robert as well. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Gary. Hi, Chris. Sorry, I haven't called you back, Chris. I've been non-stop. It's been like today I had 3 events. Can you believe it? It's supposed to be Sunday, my day of rest, but that's life.
Yes,
One
yes.
is family. One is family. So I had to do that, be part with the family. Then I had to go to an event in town to help fundraise for a project. So
Okay.
yeah. And what's interesting is so much going on at the moment. It's trying to keep up with the, it's like you need an army. It's, it's sort of, in terms of learning, the main thing is when you learn, you have to then implement it. Otherwise, it's wasted.
Yeah.
So the good thing is we had a very big event at the O2. That was quite a big global event. And then 2 days ago, we had an event with cybersecurity because my business partner is based in Dubai, and he works at a very high level with governments and big companies on cybersecurity. You all know without cybersecurity, you can have the best business, but if they decide to hack you and you don't have the protection, then that's quite a challenge. So yeah,
that's what it's going to be interesting. It's Web3 week this week in London, isn't it?
exactly.
So there's
yeah.
lots and lots of events on all over the place.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The criticality of cybersecurity has never been keener. I do a lot of stuff in the insurance sector, and cybersecurity obviously is important because they offer insurance for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's still a Wild West in some ways in terms of the rate of development.
Yes.
And the attack vectors or the threat vectors are changing as well. So you've moved away from originally where it was kind of like maybe it was a few people who were real geeky specialists who knew how to hack. Then you had the script kiddies who could start just like downloading some code and it'll get them hacked. But now you've got nation state sponsorship of hacking and this kind of thing. And the line quickly blurs between nation state, organized crime, and military in terms of things. So it's a whole, it is a battlefield.
It is. It's ongoing. And unless you protect the whole grid system, because we had people from the different embassies who obviously are looking at protecting their data and the people they're connected to. And what we found is you have to develop like a one-stop shop because there are a lot of specialists in different fields in cybersecurity, but nobody's actually put a one-stop shop whereby
you don't want to. So it was interesting that because I've been in this space for a number of years, again on the insurance and the risk side of things, and it's been interesting where people have been adopting what's called a fortress mentality. It's this whole idea of layers of protection and defense in depth and 3-level type stuff, but it's built on kind of like the concept of building a castle where you've got your wall, you've got your moat, you've got all this kind of stuff. And actually, they're beginning to realize that's probably not the way to do it. And what you actually do is you design your systems to be anti-fragile. And so rather than trying to develop a holistic, all-encompassing military style of defense, you actually design your systems with the assumption that they will be hacked.
Yeah.
And the mentality around that's different.
Yes, but what this particular, I mean, what we specialized in is who are the players who are coming into the field, who are the ones authorized, and a lot of that, the people who are the gatekeepers, put it that way, is they have the authority and they can check if anyone is trying, they have a system using AI to be able to pick out who are the ones in the organization who have got their own agenda.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's quite, in fact, I'm glad you brought it up, Gary, because I will arrange a Zoom call so that you get a more deep, because it's a long conversation. So
it's a fascinating area as well. You look at how some companies are addressing it with AI, for example, where there are companies who are doing heuristic analysis on, what's the typical behavior of, an administrator, for example. And so you can build a profile that an administrator, an office person, whatever, works normally between these hours, normally uses this computer, normally accesses files of this type, normally goes to these external sites. So you can build up a kind of like a profile of individuals, and you can use that to say, hang on, this finance manager is suddenly looking at HR data for a region. And that kind of, loads of that stuff going on. Yeah, I find it fascinating. I looked at what the likes of Kinetic are doing. So we were saying before about how cybersecurity is like a battlefield. And so that's why a lot of the defense industry are becoming leaders in this space. So Kinetic, which has got a lot of defense industry people in it, really good. British Aerospace are really into this kind of thing, and aerospace dynamics. So it'd be interesting to have a conversation sometime about what you guys are doing on that.
I mean, main thing, as you just pointed out, the key players, defense and the airport authorities, because they have to protect, because once you let people into the system, if you don't have a way of tracking or, that is critical, and a lot of countries don't have that yet. They sort of these the wrong people get in, the criminals and the drug people, and that's then to track them later is virtually impossible.
So that's where bringing it back to the blockchain side of things gets interesting again, where you've got things like Web3.
Yeah.
And one of the principles around Web3 is that you own your own identity.
That's it.
Which goes totally against government type systems, which tend to prefer having a centralized registry of citizens, of sanctions lists, and all this kind of thing. It's interesting to see how they're going to cope with people who go more to citizen-owned data as opposed to data owned about the citizen.
Yeah, I think this is where, for me, I've always believed that the government should, because I do a lot of projects on health with scientists, and I'm a trustee for something called therapy database, where you take all the different health products, prescription plus alternative. And so we've decided that you cannot put a name and personal details to that conversation, because that's when, if it's hacked, you're in trouble. Yeah. So they've created an ID system, so that you only the gatekeepers have access to that. So if somebody hacks into the system, they don't know who's who.
So it's funny because in fact, I think Christopher and I have had chats about health records and that kind of thing previously. So I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and we were dealing with what was supposed to be anonymized data. But it's surprising how, whether you've hacked it or whether you've obtained it legitimately, there are ways of de-anonymizing data, particularly healthcare data. and particularly things like prescription data and events data around medical interventions, medical episodes. So I always find it interesting when people say they've anonymized the patient data, because it's always less anonymous than you would imagine. And also with future capabilities, and this is where quantum computing starts coming into play as well, that will allow you to decrypt a lot of stuff that is encrypted at the moment that you think, oh yeah, it's perfectly safe. And this is where, again, the insurance industry is taking an interest, because you've got the risk that there's the old saying at the moment that 90% of companies know that they've been hacked. Okay? It's just that the other 10% don't know it. So ultimately, everyone is being hacked, has been hacked, and that kind of. The problem is going to be there are companies being hacked now where data is being exfiltrated in an encrypted form that can't currently be decrypted. But in 5 years' time, the hackers will have the ability to decrypt it then. And that means they'll suddenly be able to access some very confidential, very private, very personal information that was stolen 5 years earlier. And from a company liability perspective, that's quite worrying.
Yeah.
And a lot of insurance companies, I don't think I've quite got their head around that, because it's what's known as long tail events, in that it takes years to play out. Insurance companies don't like long tail events. You look back at asbestosis is the classic one, where it's the long play of things. So interesting stuff. Definitely worth another conversation, because it's
definitely
an area where I've got several overlaps. And
fantastic.
And again, Christopher, I'm right. We were talking about electronic healthcare records at one point, weren't we?
I mean, like you said, with Web3, being more patient-centered ownership of records in healthcare, and how we've come from Web2 into a new paradigm of thinking in Web3, and giving more ownership, decentralized wallets, being able to own your financial world with using that. But the only thing is as well is the appetite, because while I went to that event at DLA Piper, and within the corporate world, there's still ambiguity around DeFi. Really, is DeFi decentralized finance or not? And most of it is centralized. Very few, or if any, of the DeFi projects or protocols, whatever you want to call it, are decentralized. And it gives you, so they're trying to define what really is DeFi, and is there an appetite for more, especially in capital markets and in the financial industry, because the financial industry is only a small part of the world economy, isn't it? It's only 10-15%. There's other industries that really are bigger and more important in some way aspects, how they're going to adopt Web3 or blockchain or tokenization and real world assets, and how that's going to be adopted, and implemented.
Well, that's where I always find it interesting, and I love it whenever I listen to experts on stage, and they've been an expert in a particular industry or sector for about 6 months. And then they start saying things like, oh, it's really difficult to define DeFi, blah, 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 blah. The problem is most people are thinking that decentralized finance means that it's the finance that's decentralized, when it's not. It's the governance of the systems that is decentralized. And so the whole concept, people completely misunderstand what decentralized finance means. It's not about decentralizing the finance. It's about decentralizing the governance that manages it. And that's why most people are getting it totally wrong. It's a bit like when you hear people talk about smart contracts. And, the first thing is, as we always say now, smart contracts are neither smart nor contracts in the most case. And so most people misunderstand what DeFi actually is. And the problem is that doesn't stop them from trying to define it anyway. And that's where you start getting this thing of opinion leaders going down a particular route. But typically, it's the governance of the system not where the system is hosted or who runs it or anything like that. So you got things like Ethereum. Ethereum, you could argue now, is not decentralized because of the influence of a small number of Ethereum Foundation members. So, is that decentralized or not? The system is decentralized, the blockchain layer is decentralized, or rather it's distributed. And this is, again, people quite often confuse the word distributed with decentralized. Decentralized is where stuff is. It's all spread out. Sorry, distributed is where it's all spread out. Decentralized is where the governance of it is held. And most systems do not have decentralized governance. A few DAOs do, where the governance and decision making is truly split amongst the community. But most of the time, they're actually distributed systems, they're not decentralized systems. But again, it's a fascinating topic, and I've been on a few panels and I've had a few interesting conversations about where people go, oh, no, this is decentralized finance. It's like, no, it's not the finance bit that's decentralized. It's the governance of the system that's decentralized. So anyway.
I mean, if we're having this conversation now and we're getting decision makers within these big organizations,
yep,
unsure, unknowing, maybe don't want to know, how is it going to move forward?
So you're right, but this is where I'm old enough to have been through enough hype cycles of technology now to see a recurring pattern happening. And what always happens is that whenever you see a new innovation trigger, it's marketing people who take control. So it's all hyped up. And this kind of ties in with the Gartner hype cycle, where they talk about an innovation trigger, peak of inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, plateau of reality, or whatever it's called. And the problem is that quite often it's the people who go on stage initially to evangelize this stuff are marketeers who are marketing a concept, not actually understanding the technology. And then they gather enough interest, they raise enough funding, they get enough money invested, and then over time, the technology plays catch up. And I've seen that with multiple instances now, whether it's blockchain, whether it's AI, which, everyone's saying about how AI has suddenly exploded out of nowhere. Whereas it's actually been around since, I think it was 1954 was when it was first talked about. So it's over 70 years old. And everyone's saying, AI is new and generative AI and all this kind of thing. And then they say, well, blockchain's not going anywhere because it's been around for over 10 years and it's not got anywhere. And you go, well, the internet's been around for 40 years and we're only just coming to terms with that. So again, it's quite often it's marketers who hype something beyond its capabilities, and then the technologists spend several years trying to actually make it deliver what it was supposed to do. So I think you're right, and this is where I think the missing point quite often, and I think Chris and I are aligned on this, is education. It's about educating people, organizations, managers, decision makers about the realities. What is this technology? How does it actually work? What difference does it make? What's the so what? What does it really do that's different? And what are the things to watch out for? What are the opportunities, but what are the risks as well? This is the thing that horrifies me about things like ChatGPT and that at the moment, that people are using the output from it, which is great because it can really help you. But if they're taking it at face value and they're not actually digging to make sure it's correct, then it's quite a dangerous thing. And it's because they don't understand how generative AI works to appreciate why it's not actually telling them what they think it's telling them. I always do I might have done this with you guys. I'll just quickly show. Can you both see me, by the way? You just hold your hand up. Can you see me? Hold your hand up. Yeah, no, you can't. You can see an image of me. You can see an image of me, which is some pixels on a screen, which have been transmitted electronically. But as far as you're concerned, you can see me. So is that right?
Yes.
And that's exactly the same with technology, that we forget what it is we're actually seeing. And we're just going, yeah, that's good enough for what we think. And it's the same with a lot of technology. So, generative AI in there. We see something and we think we know what it is. And it actually isn't quite what we think it is. So the very fact it's based on data that has trained it in some way, this is where biases come into play and all this kind of stuff. So I just find it fascinating. So I guess, Chris, coming back to your point about, what we need to do in that, it comes back to educating people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I'll let you go ahead, Robert.
No, I think what you both are on the same wavelength, because I think that's, I do talks at universities. At the moment, I'm doing one with the Bayes Business University in London, City of London. They used to be called CAS, but they had to take the name off because of the past. But you're right. If it doesn't, actually, the education should start a lot earlier. So the kids are more holistic in the way they are living rather than just one-sided. And that's not happening, sadly. And they don't have the life skills. So when they come out from the education, they don't know, they cannot code. It's unless someone shows them how to do this, learn about the financial markets and things like that. It should be done in a more holistic way,
Well, I mean, you're talking about kids, adults, need to be educated. For instance, I've got a community called Crypto Coffee Club. That's my community that I'm building. And I said, I'm coming on this call, discussion on digital assets. Jump on, just have a listen to learn. And I know people have seen it in the WhatsApp group, but no one's jumped on. So it's just the appetite to really understand what we have our hands on here. That people, I think, there's an apathy. I'll give an example. There's a job that an agent came to me to work at the London Stock Exchange. Obviously, I worked there for 12 years. They see me as a good fit as a solution architect. But the issue they're having in recruiting is that the existing architects, enterprise architects, are out of touch with the technology. Web3, they don't understand it. Blockchain, tokenization, they don't understand it. And they're not willing to understand it and believe in it. So they're going outside to attract a new type of architect, a new type of individual that really understands it and can design and systems using that technology.
I think it's all fascinating. It worries me when you say about enterprise architects who don't want to know about the new stuff. Because usually I would hope that they're the ones who are the evangelists,
exactly.
who are leading the way, because they need to be working with the business area to say, well, what's your business strategy? How can we use technology to help us? And sometimes that is going to be just upgrade your legacy systems and keep them running type thing. But other times there's going to be really groundbreaking new ways of being competitive and introducing things. And that's where you have to have a good understanding of technologies. So it's fascinating as well if you think about the organization you're talking about, which has been through a massive transformation from an in-person physical marketplace to a digital first, completely online one, which means that they've got a good grasp of technology. It's just where you take that.
I posted a video in the chat because, I move around with people, the 1%, the ones who are awake, and they see how trends and who's controlling what and how they do it. And it's quite worrying when you see that just about 4 or 5 companies, global companies, who control the whole, whether it's the education.
Blackrock by any chance?
This video is like a eye opener for people who wonder why the world is in such a mess, and why there's such a gap between the rich and the poor, and why there aren't any ethical, sustainable models that's designed to share in communities, because they don't want this. They don't want people to come together. Their strategy is divide and rule using fear. and that keeps going on, because they use the media to do all their brainwashing.
I think it is fascinating if you look at company structures and ownership and that, and you eventually discover that Vanguard and Blackrock basically owns everything in the world.
Yeah, they do. And the funny part is the Vanguard, and they only have shares in each other, so they're between two of them. I mean, this is the frightening part, because what I'm seeing now, there's going to be a big shift with the BRICS, because the BRICS these governments have never had a chance in the past, because it was always controlled. US and Britain and Europe, had that edge. Now it's shifting, and I think where the blockchain is coming to place, because now you cannot do any creative accounting like you did.
So it's definitely going to be interesting. So for anyone who's watching this afterwards, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The original's a bit behind that. But in January, they are admitting, I think, 7 more countries, if I remember correctly.
South Africa, yes, Saudi is.
Yeah, South Africa is already active thing.
Yeah.
But Saudi, I'm trying to remember one of the South American countries and a few others. But it's interesting that from an economic perspective, it could finally have that big shift, because I think it represents something like 52% of the world's economy.
Yes.
In some way, and several billion people as well. If you think India and China alone is over 2.5 billion, so that's like almost kind of like a quarter of the world's population. And you're right, the concept of putting stuff onto a blockchain is kind of fascinating, because it provides transparency and openness. But what I've discovered is that most organizations and most governments want transparency and openness of everybody else, but not of themselves. It's the classic one. The one obvious use case for blockchain would be on voting systems. Wouldn't it be brilliant? And in fact, as part of the review of the 2018 election in the US, where there was the whole debacle about voter fraud and machines not working and Dominion and all this kind of stuff, and blockchain was actually mentioned as a possible solution for that, where you'd actually record the votes in that. The problem is, as we were saying before about companies having a vested interest in not doing something, it's often the case that governments have got a vested interest in not being as transparent as you might want as well. So I noticed we've been joined by JT as well, who's staying very quiet there. I'd expected him to leapt in fury about something by now. Hey, JT.
Hi. Sorry, I'm on the train, so I'm just listening today.
Hey, no problem. Yeah, we've been talking about a number of topics, really. About one of the crypto events that was in London last week. We've got the Web3 festival, or whatever you want to call it, in London the whole of next week. So there's going to be loads and loads of events going on. And we're just talking generally about, what Web3 means around self-sovereign digital identity, personal ownership of data, and a whole range of other things, really. So interesting stuff.
Do you know, Gary, there was an event in Japan, a big event, but I'm trying to get to see if there's any links or information. I
don't know. I found I was in Tokyo a few years ago, and I went to a crypto event. It was just like a crypto meetup type thing, and I found it fascinating, because I'd spent a day going around Tokyo, seeing Japanese people behave in what you would describe as conformist, exactly as you would expect society to operate type thing. And actually aligning with all the stereotypes you hear about the way people walk down the street, very courteous, and then the salarymen getting drunk in the evening and all this kind of thing. And then I went to this crypto event, and it was like, this is a different country. It was amazing. And there must have been about 200 people there, about 2/3 of which were Japanese, a third were Westerners or whatever. I was just amazing. I listened to a pitch for a Mongolian crypto mining project that was all spoken in Japanese. But every so often you'd hear things like, domo arigato moshi hash rate. It's like, fascinating. But it was great. But I don't know what was the actual event then. Do you know what the topic was or anything, Robert?
No, I'm trying to get the information. It was on to do with the Web3 blockchain. Yeah.
There's they've got a really active community out there.
Yeah.
I mean, South Korea is even.
They're huge. They're massive.
They're really into like the gaming space and the crypto space and tokenization and that. So.
Have you come across the because obviously look at like me and Christopher, because there are platforms which are developing quite nicely on the metaverse, because that's when the sustainable models will come from, because once those models are created, because I'm taking a look at who's doing what at what level, because that allows the little guy to be part of this community, but the architects are now putting this together, a holistic model where you can bring in as many other companies into that space where you're collaborating rather than competing.
Yeah. I'd say I gave a talk on this a few weeks ago, so I did some additional research. I would check out the likes of NVIDIA, because NVIDIA are a gaming chip manufacturer, so they make GPUs. They're also absolutely on the ball with metaverse development, and they've got all sorts of capabilities. And I actually went along virtually to I think it was a 3-day metaverse conference a few months ago, and I was really impressed by it. They're doing loads of stuff. If you go onto NVIDIA's website, it's got details of how to connect onto their metaverse and how they're building communities now. But yeah, you're right. There's all sorts doing it. So as well as the gaming metaverses, so like the likes of Roblox, which is a main one, and Minecraft and that, you've also got brands who are positioning themselves in this space. So Adidas, Reebok, Starbucks are positioning themselves. They seem to be blending. They've got a project in the States at the moment called Odyssey. And Odyssey is like loyalty points. But it's a loyalty point scheme which seems to be kind of Web3 based, and links into the metaverse. So you can do things like virtual trip to Costa Rica, I think it is, to watch beans and how they're developed and how they grow the coffee and that. So there's loads and loads of stuff. And Christopher, I don't know, with the real estate stuff you're doing, that there's some overlap with metaverse, physical and virtual as well, isn't there? There's a lot of stuff around digital twins and that kind of thing, I believe.
Not so much on the metaverse. I think what they're doing is creating a resort, something that's real, physical, that allows, this word that we use in the industry, democratization of investing, allowing many people to have a small bit of a project, and to have ownership in some sort of way. But I think when it comes down to the metaverse, I've kind of moved away from it a little bit, because there was a lot of hype around it last year.
Yep.
And then I guess people are building within this bear market across the board in all economies. But I'm very much more concerned of how do we get there to the metaverse, but in the sense of in between all these products that some of these tech companies coming out, like Facebook has come, or Meta come up with this new Ray-Bans.
New headsets.
Yeah, Ray-Bans, where you can stream to your audience exactly what you're seeing. Now, that's a leap forward, really. It's going to pique a lot of interest in that aspect, and that could be a way of augmented reality really coming into fore, which could be a prelude into the metaverse. Obviously Apple's got their product that'll be on the market next year, and but when it comes down to real world assets, I think, with all the assets that all these big companies like BlackRock and Vanguard have, how are they going to tokenize it? How are they going to put trillions and trillions worth of assets onto the blockchain? That's something that they're trying to figure out.
I mean, personally, my suspicion is, at least for at least 10 years, they won't, because actually there's no value in them doing it. Unless, this is always a funny thing, that when you get technologists leading a conversation, it's always about how do we get onto this new technology, blah, blah, blah. And it's never about actually, do we need to? And for a lot of the stuff, the big companies, they operate the way they do. They don't actually need to. But you're right around the VR side of things. I don't know if you guys have ever tried VR headsets, but I went to an event a while ago where we tried mixed reality, augmented reality, some Oculus Rift and some other things. The VR headsets were so unbelievably immersive in the experience that it's like it was tapping into some part of your brain that hasn't been engaged for centuries time. It was profound. It was almost like going on, I'd imagine going on drugs in some way. That the experience was quite profound. And that's where I think we're going to have a real problem in the future. So you look at how addictive games are for children and that, and trying to drag kids off playing the latest simulators, whatever. Once you put them into those games in a VR, fully immersive experience, I don't think they're going to come out. I think they're going to put the headset on. It is Ready Player One in reality, and I think they're going to stay in there. I think we're going to have a need for healthcare to cater for virtual reality addiction. I think it's that potent a thing, but it's incredible, and I think when it's done right, it's amazing. So Meta, or certainly Mark Zuckerberg the other day, I believe, was doing an interview with somebody where they were using VR headsets to conduct the interview. And the interviewer was saying, this really does feel as though I'm in the same room with you having this meeting. So you look about, what's the opportunity with that for business? We're on Zoom right now, and, it works. We can communicate, we can see things and that. Imagine, and you can do it, in fact, Zoom in VR is going to really start plugging into you feel as though you're in the same room. So maybe this concept of, office working versus remote working, that's going to get really blurred, because if the only reason I need to be physically next to somebody is because effectively I can interact with them, but you can replicate that by having a headset on where I look and it's as though they're next to me, solves that problem. So I think we're living in the most amazing time for technology and what's going on. And I think we're just at the beginning of it in some ways.
Yeah.
And we still haven't cracked the problem of staying on mute, as Robert just demonstrated.
Yeah, we are. I think.
I had noise on the background, so I muted. My wife was talking to a friend who just came in. But anyway, I was just saying, when I have these conversations with anyone who's new to what's happening, is I say we are living in the most exciting times in human history.
Yep.
And, the people who take time out to learn and immerse themselves, because you have to invest time, now is the time, because it's really exciting. And as far as Britain is concerned, we are very blessed, because being out of the EU, that's put us in a very awkward state in terms of how do we build our, get more entrepreneurs, because it has to be on technology. And, because it solves so many problems fast. Okay, it's going to replace a lot of jobs, we know that. But it's also going to educate people to be more creative.
I think that the phrase I love to use is that if you think that because of technology, the world is getting faster and faster, and everything's changing faster and faster, and things are happening faster and faster, that actually means that today is the slowest day of the rest of your life, which you kind of have to let that sink in for a few seconds, and you go, "What?" But I think it is incredible that the pace of adoption of technology, what it enables. Some things, as I say, AI has been around 70 years, internet's been around 40 years. We're only just now beginning to see the real game-changing stuff. And this is where, taking that step from Web 1, where it was a static screen that you could stare at stuff, to Web 2, where it would actually refresh without you having to press the refresh button, to Web 3, where it will know what you want and it will automatically log you in with a wallet and all this kind of thing. And the fact that hopefully you'll be able to have control of your data. I think there's so much potential. It's quite incredible. And I agree with you, Robert, that people need to be learning about this to help them cope with the future. Because I think that's the ultimate thing, that these are all tools, ultimately, and tools help you. They don't necessarily replace you. What does replace you is someone else who knows how to use the tools.
And can use them for bad, to do exactly the opposite of what people expect. Imagine getting an AI more powerful, decentralized, and you actually train the AI to try to steal from everyone, from all their wallets, and you have to keep moving and try new things to don't do anything.
You're right. You're right, and I always argue that if you look at different industries and the pace at which they adopt new technologies, there's a whole layer. And I always say that the leading industry that was always the fastest adopter of new technology and innovation is the criminal industry. Criminals, highly innovative, no regulatory barriers that follow them. They're truly innovative in that kind of that was kind of time-lived. You've been lied to. But yeah, and so you're right that criminals using technology to help them is quite scary. And then the next one after that is non-benevolent state-level actors using technology in ways that are bad. And I did. I was.
Those are the first one. Yeah, those are the first one. Those.
Yeah.
Always ahead of everything.
Yeah. And that's what,
unlimited resources. That's it.
Yeah, big budgets.
Almost unlimited.
Yeah. Big budgets that never get audited and keep disappearing, so you never know what money they've got and where it's come from. Yeah, and that's where someone was saying about, talk about AI, the good, the bad, and the evil. And they were thinking that evil AI is the AI becoming sentient and developing its own abilities. Now, it's like, no. Evil is when humans use it in a bad way. And it's even more evil when it's humans who are meant to be responsible for other humans use it in a bad way. That's when you've got a real problem. So, yep, I think we're aligned there, JT, definitely.
And that's why I shared two important videos which you need to take when you after this, because both are relevant to this conversation. Okay. Is how the few who control the whole the money supply globally, is how do they play this game, because they got the money and they got the power, and this is the worrying part. Is, for me, I always believe that there is a God, there is a creator, and people have to come and collaborate as a big community. I think when you talk about tipping points and numbers, anyone who reaches 5 million, a community of like-minded people, which takes time to build that community, but anyone who hits that number, you have a voice, okay? But there's so many individual groups, because I try and see who does what in various groups. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm trying to build communities using the Telegram site, because on Facebook and all, they restrict you in what you can share. Yep. Whereas on Telegram, you can have bigger groups up to 200,000 plus. So, as you said, we need to find ways of making sure we have the best protection and encryption at some stage where they can't really try and divide and rule, because that's likely to happen.
I guess as well, Robert, while you're sharing videos and that kind of thing, I don't know if any of you have seen the Money Masters.
Yes, I've seen it.
That's for anyone who wants to understand how federal banking works and how money systems work. That should be mandatory watching for every economics student.
Yes.
That and read the book Jekyll Island as well, I think is.
I haven't. What's that about, Gary?
Jekyll Island is about the formation of the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
And it goes back to when it was created and the history of it. Again, truly fascinating.
And all the top banks control it.
Yep. Exactly.
That's the most important thing,
Yep.
And the first video I posted is very relevant. It go in details, and it'll give you it also does gives you factual information, going back to confirm what's going on. And this is stuff that everyone should be aware of, because if you're not aware of how we are controlled with our food, with the water, the banking system, the education, the politicians, people think these politics are in the politicians' power. Not really. They're puppets, really.
It's as I've been saying for a while, and I think I mentioned it with one of the guys who was on the call the other week, that the only thing that's changing, because people think that society is changing at the moment, it's like, no, nothing's changing. The only thing that's actually changing is your awareness of how the world really works. That's all. So if we can make it more transparent through blockchain, that would be good.
Oh, perfect. That's the ideal scenario.
But I think the reality is that there are too many vested interests that will prevent that from happening for a very long time. So interesting. Right, folks, we've got less than 10 minutes left. It's a fascinating, interesting, different discussion where we kind of started with DeFi and went around there, and then
I missed the beginning, so sorry.
It's okay. But this is the whole thing. This is why I enjoy these conversations, because we end up talking about at times quite peripheral things that actually come back to the really, really important thing. Oh, JT, who's filed an Amicus brief now then? So we just
wow, yes, I'm aware of this. Yeah,
Paradigm. Why have they done it? So for those, I'm guessing, does this link in with the original thing where the SEC is prosecuting Binance? And then when you have what's called an amicus brief, that's where an interested third party can state that they believe they may be materially impacted by the judgment. And so they want to file as part of it in support or against. So JT, tell us more. What's this about?
Well, this is about really ongoing processes from SEC against Binance, and they basically Paradigm is very, very big organization, as you know, in this space, and they basically saying that the SEC is wrong, especially on secondary sales, because there is no contract actually. Just a second part for people trading, buying, selling tokens. I mean, you can read it. It's very, very interesting. They say exactly why the SEC it's overreaching. It's trying to change or push for change in law, or trying to do things that the law doesn't say exist.
Okay.
Super interesting, and I think Paradigm on the money on this one.
So that's interesting, where they're suggesting that the SEC is trying to write the law as opposed to enforce it. I think that's been the point that's been made for a while now with the previous case with the SEC against Ripple.
Correct.
Yeah, that there was a feeling of regulatory overreach, and the regulator was no longer just enforcing the regulations, but was effectively trying to create its own regulations without legislation to support it. Okay, that's an interesting one. Thanks for sharing that one. We'll see where that goes.
Indeed. I think.
To close out for my part, when it comes to the education part, Gary, how we can do more to educate people on this, and to empower people to take on this information and understand how to use the tools.
So I've got a perspective that I think up till now we've been educating the wrong people in how to use technology. I think unfortunately what we've been doing is that we've been educating normal people in how to use technology. What we need to do is educate the technologists in how to make the technology so easy to use that the end user doesn't need educated in the first place. And I see Robert smiling with that.
No, it's music to my ears, because I think in the past you couldn't do it. Now it's easier to actually help people to learn faster, because it's not rocket science. It's just making it user friendly, and I think that's the best way. And as Christopher said, it's the education and that we must do. It has to start at a grassroots level. So there is a gap with the older generation who thought, enough of the mobile, they want to give it a break. But sadly, the mobile is the one which opens up a lot of doors. And if you're a digital nomad, you need the mobile and the laptop to do whatever you want. And it's created a new wave of entrepreneurs.
So, Christopher, again, come back to your point about the education. I think we do need to educate technologists in how to make stuff so easy that people will just use it, so they don't have to think about it. I think what we then need to do, or at the same time, is we need to educate people in concepts like critical thinking, teaching them how to think for themselves and how to evaluate things, and teaching them how to teach themselves. One of the things I love seeing at the moment is seeing some children who are becoming very independent in how they learn. So, their first step now, I've seen this with some where, they've got a problem and they're trying to work out how to solve it. So they just go to YouTube, and YouTube's got an explainer video. You want to know about Pythagoras theorem? Here it is, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we've never had a better opportunity at educating ourselves. And so I think we just need to encourage people and educate people on how to educate themselves in some ways. And I think teaching people how to learn, I think, is critical. And I think teaching people how to be critical in their assessment of things is crucial as well, so that they don't just take what they're told at face value. A bit like, as we were saying earlier on with ChatGPT. ChatGPT can format some amazing material, looks really, really good, but you need to go away and check if it's correct. And that's where the newer versions, GPT-4 and what Bing's done with their product and that, where they're linking it in with both search engine and a generative technology as well. So it does actually validate that what it says is correct, is great. But we need to get people to question things. And then you've got things like finance education. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who didn't realize that with a bank account, when you deposit your money in a bank account, it ceases to be your money. And most people do not realize that. And so they get upset when they say things like, I wanted to use my money to buy some crypto and the bank wouldn't let me use my money. Well, guess what? It's not your money. And that's why the bank has got the power to say, no, you can't have it. So educating people about that kind of stuff as well, I think is important. But again, there are vested interest in people not actually understanding how some of these things really work. Because if you knew how a bank account really worked, would you really put as much money in it as many people do? You probably wouldn't. And the problem with that is that then upsets the banks who want you to put your money in because that then becomes a loan that they can then make money out of by selling on to other people as a loan. And that's where they make their money. And they don't want you to know that. So I find it fascinating. The thing I've loved about crypto is that it's taught me, whereas people often say, oh, I don't understand crypto. And so you go and learn about crypto. The more interesting journey is you go and learn about how real finance works, the traditional finance world, like banking and payments and that kind of thing. And you realize it's all smoke and mirrors. It's not actually how you think it is. So.
Yeah.
I mean, self custody is the way to go, and taking responsibility of your own economic situation.
Yeah. So with that's again music to my ears, because I agree, self custody, but it needs to be self custody in solutions that are really easy to use, really simple, are hacker resistant, and all that kind of thing. There's probably a great point to close the call off because we're on the hour now. So guys, thanks very much for a really interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. I hope anyone watching it afterwards on YouTube enjoyed it. Hope to see you again sometime, folks.
Thanks, Gary.
And thanks everyone who's been watching today. Hope you enjoyed that. Do click on the like, subscribe, make comments. If you'd like any additional information, post a question in the chat or whatever. And also remember, we hold these sessions every Sunday evening, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. UK time, open to everybody, novices and experts alike. So I hope you enjoyed it. See you next week.